What if the most powerful moments of your life aren't happening during the day, but in the silence of midnight? Kathryn Kuhlman discovered a hidden routine that didn't just change her, it opened heaven. No cameras, no audience, just one decision repeated night after night that unlocked something the world couldn't explain. And the truth is, you have the same invitation, but will you answer it? She didn't wait for a special feeling. She didn't need the room to shake or the atmosphere to feel electric. Kathryn Kuhlman understood something most people miss. Heaven doesn't respond to emotion, it responds to consistency. And her midnight hour wasn't some rare moment she stumbled into when life got quiet or convenient. It was a chosen rhythm, a decision she made night after night, whether she felt strong or completely empty. That's where the power came from, not just the presence she experienced, but the routine she built around it. While others prayed when they were in crisis, Kathryn made it part of her life. Midnight wasn't a reaction, it was a routine, a sacred one. When everyone else was calling it a day, she was beginning the most important part of hers. She didn't see those hours as optional. They were non-negotiable, because she knew that power doesn't just fall out of the sky. It's drawn into a life that makes space for it. Every single night she made space. There were no theatrics, no special candles or music, just her in her space showing up, and that act alone, showing up consistently, was the seed of everything that followed. Most people are waiting for breakthrough. They want clarity, they want strength, they want something to shift. But Kathryn's life proves something vital. What you do when no one's watching creates the momentum that shifts everything else. She didn't pray once in a while and expect power to follow. She prayed every night because she knew that routine invites revelation. We live in a time where everyone wants to go viral, wants to be seen, wants something to happen fast. But Kathryn wasn't in a rush. Her midnight routine wasn't about results. It was about relationship. It was about leaning in slowly, deeply, until her heart aligned with what she couldn't see. And she didn't build that alignment overnight. She built it every night. The reason her life carried such weight, such undeniable power, is because she had a foundation that wasn't shaken by emotions, schedules, or public opinion. It was built in the quiet, in the dark, over and over again. Even when she was tired, even when she didn't feel anything, even when she questioned herself, she still showed up, and that consistency became the open door to something far bigger than herself. She never looked for the dramatic. She didn't expect lightning to flash or voices to boom from heaven. Her midnight routine was often simple. She sat, she listened, she poured out what was on her heart. Sometimes she wept. Sometimes she didn't say much at all. But she kept coming back because she understood something. Heaven meets the consistent, not just the desperate. That's the part that challenges most of us. It's easy to pray when everything is falling apart. Easy to whisper words into the night when you're broken and hungry for help. But what about when life feels normal? What about when things are quiet? Not just around you, but inside you. That's when routine becomes powerful. That's when the decision to show up again and again and again starts forming something in you that emotions never could. Kathryn didn't wait for motivation. She lived by discipline. Her midnight routine was her anchor. And it didn't start after she became known. It didn't begin once the crowds came. It was the routine long before the miracles, long before the recognition, long before the stage. That's what makes it so powerful. It wasn't something she developed because she needed to maintain her influence. It was something that built her into the kind of person who could be trusted with that influence. Every night she was planting seeds. Some nights felt full, others felt dry. But she never judged the value of the moment by how it fell. She judged it by her faithfulness to keep the appointment, and over time that faithfulness began to shape her from the inside out. Her thoughts changed, her instincts sharpened, her spirit deepened. Not because she asked for more power, but because she showed up with more surrender. You can't fake that kind of foundation. You can't pretend your way into that kind of presence. Kathryn's midnight routine was proof that true power comes from what you repeat, not just what you request. It was the rhythm of her life that opened doors no one else could see, and maybe that's the key we've overlooked. It's not about doing more, trying harder, or performing better. It's about returning again and again to that quiet space where routine meets presence and presence rewrites everything. Because when you build your life around that hour, heaven doesn't just visit. It begins to stay. It was never about the spotlight. It wasn't about crowds, microphones, or applause. For Kathryn Kuhlman, the most sacred part of her life happened behind closed doors, when the world was asleep and no one was watching, and the setting was simple: a room, a chair, maybe a dim light, and silence that most people are too uncomfortable to sit in. But that was where heaven opened for her, not in the noise of public ministry, but in the quiet surrender of midnight routine. She didn't dress it up. She didn't perform. She came as she was, sometimes strong, sometimes shattered, always sincere. Because for her, midnight wasn't about ceremony. It was about honesty. When she sat in that chair, it wasn't for show. It was the one place she didn't have to lead, didn't have to preach, didn't have to prove anything. She just had to be real, and in that simplicity, something sacred took shape. It wasn't the words she prayed that made the difference. It was the posture she carried. That chair became her altar. That room became her sanctuary. Not because it was perfect, but because it was consistent. Kathryn had found a rhythm that the world had forgotten, the rhythm of stillness, the power of quiet pursuit. Every night she returned to that place. Not because she felt guilty if she didn't, not because she feared consequences, but because she wanted to, because that hour had become her lifeline. It wasn't obligation, it was oxygen. She needed that space to breathe in what she couldn't get anywhere else. She didn't run to people, plans, or platforms. She ran to that room, and that choice, night after night, changed everything. When the noise of the day died down and the distractions faded, that's when she truly came alive. Not because the world was watching, but because her spirit was listening. She sat in that chair like it was the most important meeting of her life, not rushing, not multitasking, just open, just available. And in that availability, the atmosphere began to shift, slowly, quietly, but deeply. She understood something we tend to miss. The sacred doesn't need a crowd. It doesn't need a performance. It just needs space. And she made space in her posture, in her time, in her routine. She welcomed something greater into something so small. And that's the beauty of it. Heaven didn't need a stage. It only needed surrender. That surrender wasn't loud. It wasn't always emotional. Sometimes it was just a whisper. Sometimes just silence. Sometimes just tears she couldn't explain. But it was real. It was raw. And it was consistent. That's what set her apart. She didn't visit the sacred. She lived in it. And it all started with one decision: to show up, to sit, to be still, to be honest. There was no script, no formula. Some nights she sat there with nothing to say. Other nights she poured out everything inside her. And yet, those moments became the very place where she was filled again, where she found direction, where she found strength, where she found peace that didn't make sense, and power she couldn't manufacture. That room became the source of everything people saw later. The grace, the power, the atmosphere she carried. It all came from what happened when no one else was around. People looked at Kathryn and saw results. What they didn't see was the rhythm, the repetition, the decision to make a chair in a quiet room more important than any stage. And that's the invitation for us, to stop chasing the loud and return to the quiet. To stop searching for moments and start building a routine, not to impress anyone, not to earn anything, but to become someone. Because when you choose stillness over speed, presence over performance, surrender over striving, you begin to carry something you didn't even know was possible. Kathryn didn't wait for breakthrough. She made space for it, and that space began with one quiet chair, one surrendered heart, and one midnight routine that opened heaven. There came a point in Kathryn Kuhlman's midnight routine where words simply weren't enough. When the clock struck that hour and the world went quiet, she would sit, not always to speak, but to feel, to listen, to lean in. Night after night she came with an open heart, but there were moments when the weight she carried, the depth she sought, couldn't be expressed through language. And in those moments something extraordinary happened. Her spirit took over. It's easy to think prayer is all about the right words, long phrases, powerful declarations. But Kathryn knew better. She knew that sometimes words get in the way. That sometimes the deepest connection isn't verbal, it's spiritual. She didn't need to impress, didn't need to recite. She just needed to be present, fully present. And when words failed her, when emotions ran too deep for language, she would simply sit in stillness and let her spirit do what her mouth couldn't. There were nights she said nothing at all, just tears. Just a quiet knowing. And somehow, those nights became the most powerful, because there's a kind of communion that goes beyond conversation. A kind of presence that fills a room not because you're saying something, but because you've stopped long enough to hear what can't be heard with human ears. And in that silence, Kathryn received clarity, not in noise, not in volume, but in surrender. It wasn't dramatic. It wasn't emotional hype. It was raw stillness, a kind of honesty that only surfaces when you've reached the end of yourself. When there's nothing left to ask for, nothing left to explain, just you and the atmosphere of something greater. That's where her midnight routine lived, not in polished phrases, but in unfiltered surrender. Most people avoid silence. It's uncomfortable. It feels empty. But Kathryn didn't run from it. She ran toward it, because she had learned that silence isn't empty at all. It's full, full of insight, full of presence, full of answers that don't come through shouting, but through sitting. And when her spirit took over, it wasn't passive. It was powerful. That quiet space became the most active moment of her day. She didn't rely on her own understanding. She didn't force outcomes. She let go, and in that letting go, she tapped into a different frequency, one the world doesn't teach you to hear, but once you hear it, you can't unhear it. Once you feel it, you can't live without it. That's the place Kathryn returned to every night, a place where words weren't required for connection, just availability, just stillness, just spirit. It's easy to look at her life and want the miracle, the anointing, the atmosphere, but you don't get what she had without doing what she did. And what she did consistently was bring her whole self to that midnight hour, not to perform, not to demand, but to listen with her life, to sit until the noise faded and her soul aligned. That kind of routine doesn't start with a script. It starts with a decision to stop running, to stop talking, to stop explaining, and simply show up. She showed up not just with her mind or her emotions, but with her spirit fully open. And when the words ran out, she discovered that real communication doesn't always need them, because when your spirit takes over, something deeper takes place. Transformation begins. Kathryn didn't need noise to feel close to God. She didn't need volume to feel power. What she needed was stillness, stillness that allowed her to sense what others missed. And when her spirit led the way, that's when heaven responded. Not with thunder, but with unmistakable peace, with insight, with presence, with a sense of knowing that settled every doubt without saying a thing. That's the level of connection she built, not based on moments of inspiration, but through routine surrender. And when that surrender turned to silence, and silence turned to spirit, something in her shifted. And it was that shift, that deep and quiet shift, that gave her the ability to walk into rooms and change the atmosphere without saying a word. Because when your spirit has been trained in the midnight hour, you don't have to perform in the daylight. You just carry what you've received.